Welcome to 10 Very Big Books. I don't know where this episode's going up. It's somewhere. It's a short little mini episode, I suppose.
Someone's listening.
I'm Peter, you know that. With me today is Andy Smith. Andy, how you doing?
Hello. I now am considered a veteran of the show, correct?
Veteran of the show, friend of the program. And that's right. Andy and I just finished recording our chat on Boing Hunters.
Boing Hunters. Book.
Yeah, that was a good chat. Fairly all over the place, as those conversations tend to be.
We sometimes talked about Bone Hunters, actually.
Sometimes book 6 got in there. So hopefully this conversation will be a little more focused, but we'll see. Andy, I believe you too received an advance copy of this book.
That is correct. I am one of the chosen.
Yeah, so it's funny. We both received advance copies, so here we are, our honest review, our God-honest thoughts on the book. I actually didn't know I could get one, and I guess I was just planning to read it when Americans were going to read it. But then I was recording Orb Scepter Throne with Iskar, and he told me how he got his, and I was like, oh, fuck, well, like, let me get in there, you know?
You can do it, yeah. Which, by the way, I will say, I was the one who told Iskar how to get his, so actually, this is a chain of...
So it all trickles down.
A chain of being, yeah.
So that's right, today on the show, we're talking about The God Is Not Willing, and I'm going to go ahead and say we're going to spoil it. I think that's the right choice.
I think so too, yeah. There's not much to say if we're not going to spoil it.
Yeah, I guess if you want some not spoiler thoughts, both of us think the book's pretty good and you should get it. Listen, which I think is a no-brainer. Listen, if you've read those 10 books, you should. I don't think you should. I don't think there's something essential here, but it's a pretty fun book. And if you were thinking about getting it, it's worth your time, is my opinion.
If you like Malazan, you're going to really like this book.
So with that said, now we're going to talk about the book. The God is not willing. He is not willing indeed. Andy Smith, you said you finished the book about a month ago. What did you make of the book? What did you walk away? The sequel to the Book of the Fallen, baby.
I really liked it. I think my first thought that I think is interesting is that this is definitely Erikson, just like with the Arcanus trilogy, like he's in the same world, but he's doing something different.
Definitely.
He's not writing it like a Book of the Fallen. Like this is much more kind of like Esselmont-esque, I guess. Like it's very focused. It's very like there's a lot of viewpoints, but like they're limited in the sense of like.
I mean, there's not that many viewpoints, which I found to be a huge relief, especially compared to the end of Crippled God, which has like got so many fucking viewpoints and introducing them up to the last second. I mean, I think if you total all the viewpoints together in the book, there's probably like a dozen maybe, or like
and if you throw together all the Marines, it's like less. It's like 6.
Exactly. Like it's especially like in my mind, there's like 4 storylines in the book or something. You know?
Yeah, it's so streamlined, and I loved reading Erikson in that same way. But he also doesn't short shrift his sort of like his stylistic sort of philosophizing. Like there's still a lot of that, especially with the rant storyline.
I think there's a lot of meat on the bone. I think there's a lot of meat on the bone.
Yeah, and so he doesn't sacrifice one thing while he sort of like focuses the other one. Not that I think Malazan is unfocused. I think he's just doing something different, and I really appreciated that. That's the kind of thing I remember most about the book, just like stylistically. And it's a page turner. I think more than most of the Malazan Book of the Fallen, minus some of the endings. Like it's a page turner.
Ditto. I mean, I read the book fairly quickly. Helps that it's a short book.
Yep. Like 500 pages or something, which again, I guess relatively short.
For Erikson's standards, right? Like
we're jaded at this point.
Yeah, we've adjusted, I suppose.
Yep, absolutely.
So I mean, generally I think I finished the book yesterday.
Oh, it's fresh for you. This is great.
Yeah. I had to read like half the book in one day, which I never prefer. I just prefer to space it out. I think I just digest it better that way. Good book. Good book, I would say.
I agree. That's a great conclusion.
Honestly, yesterday I was like, I don't even know what I'm going to talk about with Andy. I just basically think like, good book, you know?
Yep.
Nice job, Steve.
Yeah. So this is interesting because you are like so close to the forest. Like, I'm sure it's hard to like kind of, like you said, like digest more than that. And I'm a little like really far away from the forest where I can't remember the specifics, but I will tell you, here's like what jumps out at me from this book. One, I love the Rant's mom storyline. And that
Sarlis?
Is that her name? Yeah. That she is, first of all, portrayed as this like obviously horrific person. Like what she does is terrible to Rant. And like her disease is obviously horrible and doing horrible things. But I think it's very clearly a metaphor, or at least a veneer of like addiction and what it does to people. And that she is shown in the end to be this very brave woman for dealing with the addiction and trying to care for those around her as well as she could have in the situation. I think that's a really cool storyline and a really unique take.
Awesome stuff. Awesome stuff, the whole storyline with her. And when they're severing the blood oil connection from her is also just an awesome sequence. I know that's like less about her character and her internal struggle, but just like an awesome set piece. One of the best in the book. Yeah,
and another great set piece of like a good Malazan, right? They're definitely not all good, but like when they're good, they're pretty fucking awesome. And I love that. Like the maid's just like, yeah, we're gonna try to do this just because it's the right thing to do. I love Rant being like Karsa energy, but a pacifist kind of thing. Or like, not pacifist because he does fight, but like protectionist, I guess. Like just like completely loyal and like not prideful at all, which is like the exact opposite of the Karsa that we meet in House of Chains, and even to a certain point at the end of it. So I think that is fascinating, sort of this anti-Karsa storyline that still like rides the line of Karsa's storyline in many different ways, I think is really, really cool. And the veneer of like nature fighting back, I think is also pretty heavy in this book, which I think is very interesting, especially given we're in the midst of the hottest summer on record, at least where I'm at. So I that's like the most heavy metaphor.
Coldest summer for the rest of our lives. So
yeah.
I mean, it's like I almost don't even know where to begin. Let me just spit out a few other big picture thoughts I have just to get them off the chest. Man. Good book, read it really fast. I was so happy that the scope was a lot smaller. I thought you got to know some of the characters so much better. I think I walked away having such more intimate experience with people like Rant or Damask or, even the soldiers. I mean, Spindle gets a great part here. I think Stillwater is Stillwater's instantly a fan favorite. I mean, just some of this stuff is great. Going up to the Templars, all interesting stuff. And I love, it almost reminds me of, Toll of Hounds is a much more, a lot going on in that book. But I do love out books where there's two things going on and you're cutting back from this storyline and that storyline and this storyline and that storyline. For the most of this story, it basically cuts back between like what's going on with the Marines and then what's going on with Rand. And basically it's just following these two storylines for most of the book until kind of later on. But I just think it creates a great sense of pacing, some really great set pieces near the end of the book. And the whole thing just moves. And I often think Erickson is sometimes an author hamstrung by his own sensibilities. And the longer he goes, he just ends up, in my mind, like kind of trapping himself, So I actually think him writing a shorter book here, I just think he delivers so much on these pages, you know? So I was really moved by that. And I think, in my mind, the book is almost way better than it has any right to be. I think it could be one of my favorite books he's written. So
yeah, no, I completely agree. Like I have to again time and kind of wait on it, but like it is so packed full of good stuff without being in any way sloggy. It's just really well done. I mean, it was surprising to me. I didn't know what to expect out of this book. It was the first book that I read of Erickson that wasn't the main 10, and it was just, as to quote my good friend Peter, it's a good book.
Good book. I gotta tell you, here's what I kind of think. The book could be terrible, Like, I'm just saying, like, do you know it's a really common thing? Authors, like we all know, right? Carcana sells kind of bad. He's going to write this new series, follow up the series that sold better and he's famous for. Like it's about a popular character. Do you mean? Like this is sometimes a recipe for like an author writing a bad book. Do you know what I mean?
Yep.
And especially when it's like, okay, well, that series, the story that I told and is finished. Well, actually, there's another part. You haven't quite heard the end of this tale. Yep. This is all stuff that's recipe for writing an inessential and bad book, And whilst I don't know if this book is like an essential follow-up, I think it's way better than that. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. And I think it's because it's telling a direct story that clearly Erikson is very alive in the story. He's not phoning it in. He's got something he wants to say, and he's putting it on the page. And what I love about this is one of the best parts about this book is the world building and how it follows up and like how it delivers some of the more traditional sequel stuff. You know, like what's going on in the rest of the world? What happened to all the characters we love? You know, we get some answers. You know,
there's a little bit of fan service. Not a lot, but there's a little bit.
No, but you definitely find out about, like, I don't know, there's allusions to what happened to Tabor's legacy, to parents, you know.
There's an emperor, not an empress. There's...
Sure. You know, there's this stuff in the background, and you learn, and it's pretty interesting. But, like, the book kind of, it's not that invested in it. I think it's like painting it in because it's in the world, and I think Erikson knows people are kind of interested in that stuff. But the book's really doing its own thing. It's kind of just about the Templars at this other time. It's post this. It's about consequences. And I think thematically there is a connection and there is kind of a spiritual follow-up element. But like the worst idea this book could be is if it was just like, hey, did you wonder what happens after the crippled god? Let me tell you. You know, and that's not this book at all. It's really setting a mind and telling a story with interesting and engaging characters. And that's why I walked away pretty hot on the book.
Yeah, 100% agree. And I think that's exemplified. And we knew this because, we being like the fandom knew this because Erikson told us a couple months ago. But like emblematic of that is this the Witness trilogy, but like there's not a single Karsa perspective. Like we hear about him a little bit, but like he's not a character in this book. He's off in Darujistan in a tent, I think literally. So like besides that and a couple cameos, all new characters, all new everything. Like it feels like the start of something new and unique.
I think the cameos are the most fan servicey feeling thing, you know, like
I think the main one is what's his face, the guy from Toll the Hounds, the guy who helps save the kids at the end of Toll the Hounds, and he comes on a wagon, but he shows up real quickly and then leaves.
I felt like the most fan servicey was when Shadowthrone and Cotillion showed up. Just because I feel like they're just such, I don't know. I know it just struck me that way. Or the Animator Rake stuff. I mean, that was fun, but I don't know.
I think it's one of your favorite parts, though.
Listen, it is one of my favorite parts. But
yeah, a little fan servicey.
But it also strikes me as the part that's like the most like playing the hits. You know, it's like, you guys know the Malazan character. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, I guess that's true. But the line of, you know, when he's like, why should I do this? It's like to save a life. And he's like, that's always enough. It's a good part.
It's good stuff. I really liked it. But it's like when Damask shows up, I don't feel like, Steve's returning to the old well again, you know?
Yeah.
But let's talk about Damask. I feel like the book really, you know, it's funny. Here's what I was thinking about the whole time. Steve sometimes, you know, he's an active Facebook user, you know?
Good description, yep.
Steve, what he's known for. You know, sometimes I remember when he was writing this book, he would post things and he'd be like, hey, what's the names of Akarium's Warren? Or he was just asking the fan base questions about the books, you know? And I remember he was asking questions about Damask and like who he was, or like, I think he asked where Damask ended up at the end of the series, you know? And I was like, I guess, is he going to be a part of this book? But then I was struck because he's like a major character in the story.
Yeah. And I'll be completely honest, did not realize that slide finished, that he was connected to obviously the House of Chains dams. Like for some reason I just like didn't put it together in my head.
Really?
Not actively at all. In fact, it was a conversation with Iskar that like he was like, oh yeah, what did you think of that? And I was like, oh my God, I completely missed that. But it still was like super meaningful because they gave you enough that like you understood the character even if you didn't remember that. So yeah, there's my admission. Didn't realize it.
I just thought Damask was one of the characters I was moved most by in the story. I found his death really sad.
You're anti-crucifying people on rocks naked? Is that what you're telling me?
Good character. Good character.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And like the sins of his past, like being a real thing that weighed on him, and like needed some kind of recompense. It's kind of like what we were talking about in our Bone Hunters discussion. Like there's no right answer, right? This terrible person that has like caused horrific things, including slavery of like entire villages. And yet he is in some ways a changed person and wants to try to make some kind of amends. But in some ways you can't make amends for that wrong. And so it's like, what's the right answer here?
I think what's interesting, and it's interesting, I think it's key that he's in the first book, because in my mind, we really don't know what this series is, right? But of course, some part of it has essentially to do with Karsa Orlong reckoning with the consequences of his actions, you know? And here's Damask, a person who has also done terrible things, you know? And it's kind of a question in a way, I think, Damask, about like, well, is this what it looks like? Do you mean it, like, because, you know, Damask takes accountability. He says this, like, it's not like he's trying to deny what he did, and he's like trying to do these things, but what does this even out to? You know, what does this mean, and what does his death mean? You know, I think these are questions that are being asked, and about how do you overcome the sins of your past? Can you overcome the sins of your past? What does it mean to be held accountable? What does it mean for that to look like? I think all of those questions are being forefronted in his storyline. I'm assuming Karsa will be met with the consequence of his actions, and how he faces them will be a central question in these 3 books.
Yeah, well, because how I just described Damask, we can describe Karsa the same way, right? He took actions that led to horrible things, rape, murder, destruction of huge amounts of civilization, and yet also he's like a changed person by the end of it, and someone that we in general root for. But like, yeah, and again, to bring back, we talk about Toll the Hounds all the time, like, well, I guess that one time we were on a podcast, but like redemption is a key part of that. And like, at least in my view, reading of Toll the Hounds, the point is that redemption is kind of a bullshit concept. You just have to reckon with what you've done and try to do better and learn from that. So yeah, it's going to be interesting how Karsa does deal with those mistakes that are literally now coming for him.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, which is something I think, as you mentioned, is borne out by other characters in the series. I think the series kind of believes, which I have some feelings on. I don't know if we need to turn the show about it, that, you know, Damask the best Damask can do is try and do good in the present and in the future, you know?
Yeah.
Which I think is mostly true, if lacking some other context for me. But I think, yeah, good guy, good character. I really liked his part in the story. Let's quickly touch on Rant. I think I mentioned, I think Stillwater's a instant fan favorite, and I think she's an instant fan favorite in like isn't she cool? I want to read about her more. Like, I hope she's in a lot of books type of way, you know? Yep. And I think Rant seems to me like an instant fan favorite and like just kind of an iconic character, and like he just is the book, steals the show, and is probably the best part of the whole book, you know?
Yeah, I mean, he's what makes it not what you said before, right? It's definitely not at all phoning it in. Like in the other ways, you could say like, oh, another Marine troop with like,
I 100% agree. Like the Marine stuff, you're just like, part of me is like, yeah, okay, you know.
It's the Erickson thing. Like it's good, but it's like the thing.
Been there, done that in a way.
But the Rand character, it's different. It's like some of the themes we've talked about, but like, it is so strong. He's such a great character. It's so profound. It's not pulling punches, and it's completely unpredictable. You know, like how many times have we had characters wandering around without purpose or trying to find some random purpose in the Malazan books? But oftentimes it's like kind of a slow slog and sometimes doesn't go anywhere. But like Rant, like the whole time, every chapter is just fascinating, whether he's stabbing ancient spirits of K'chain Shamal or K'chain Naruk, I couldn't remember which one, like into the earth, or he's, you know, dealing with Tablor, or, you know, he's got to fight this guy, or, you know, whatever. Like, it's fascinating. His character is great. I love the simplicity of Karsa with, like I said, like sort of this like goodness, inherent goodness that Karsa kind of lacks for most of the series. He's a great character. It's just a great story.
I think he's a fleshed out character, kind of doing a coming of age thing. But what's great is all of the people he meets, be it Tablor, Damask, people in Stillwater, he challenges them, unfortunately mostly by beating. And then they challenge him in return. You know, he is a character who grows a lot in the story, and it's just good character, but best part of the book. And it's like you said, in some ways, and this is why I mentioned earlier, I think it's good that the book's somewhat short for Erickson standards. In most of the books, there's some section or just some part where like some characters just wandering around a desert for a while, and you're like, okay, I guess so. Yeah. And then like you get to them doing something else, you know? Like essentially every chapter Rant is doing something great. Yep. You know, some of the Marine chapters, they're kind of just hanging out, and that's fine. Or, you know, Junot's an awesome, let's just talk about the Marines now. So we both like Rant. Everyone likes Rant.
Everyone likes Rant.
I hope no one harmed this boy. You know, please. But, you know, also, who knows? That's a tough ask. Anyway, most of the Marines get away looking out. I think what do you think of the new squads? You know, they're pretty fun, I think, you know?
Yeah.
Standouts?
Same kind of, like, they're very fun. It's sort of been done before, but I really like it. Stillwater, like you said, I think is a standout, especially like her like Nightcrawler scene where she's going in and out of the Warrens.
So awesome. Good. When she goes into the barrow and is grave robbing, so fucking good. So good.
Hilarious. I'm forgetting the name now that I'm far away, but what's the name of the mage who accidentally inhales Ototaro dust?
Ohms? No.
Is that his? I'm forgetting his name, but like, and then he's like super good with the sword anyway, and he gets out of the scrape at the end. I really like him. Yeah. So
I like the Tangle Witch stuff with Ohms. I thought that was fun.
Who's the commander with the squeaky voice?
Gruff.
Yeah, I should have remembered that. Gruff is hilarious. I love his like Shakespearean talking. Like, that's very fun.
Love Gruff. Part of me, it's kind of a whole can of worms. I don't know if we have time for. Do you think he's coded to be queer? You know, I feel like he's like, I know he's presented as foppish, you know?
Yeah. But I don't know. Yeah, coded is a weird thing because it's quite clear that like queerness is totally fine in this world.
I don't know. I feel mixed about that, but.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Which, yeah, we can deal with that at some other point. That
kind of a whole time.
That's a big can of worms.
It's a big can of worms. I feel somewhat there's some incoherent world building there. Let's just move on.
Oh, okay. I kind of want to talk about that more, but you're right. We don't have time. I don't know. I thought he was I thought of him as a gay character, but not in a closeted sense at all. But anyway.
I instantly read him. I was like, cool, a gay dude. But I don't know if that's like, you know what I mean? I don't know.
Yeah, but I liked him a whole ton. I think the only thing that really, like, in hindsight was not, like, my favorite was this whole, like, mercenary company politics. That, to me, was just kind of, like, there. And, again, sort of, I've done that before with, like, the Greyhounds. And I was like, oh, whatever. But, like, that wasn't a huge part of it. It didn't, like, take away anything. But I also was not, like, blown away by that storyline.
Agreed. That was probably the thing I was least invested in. What is up with the Jack? The Jack are in this book? And they're in the book in a major way. I would, if you would have guessed, if you would have asked me what was going to be on the follow-up, would I be like, well, the Jack are going to play a major role?
Obviously, the Soul Taken, or not Soul Taken, the Ivers, the Jack. Yeah. No, so good. And I obviously like the leader. I'm forgetting names at this point. The leader, I think, is really, I like a lot. And then his dweeby brother.
Gower and
Nilgan, just like, I laughed out loud at him so many times where he's like, of course you didn't do that because you wouldn't be as good as me, but I'll believe you for, like, that shit. I just cracked out, literally laughed out loud as I was reading it. So that worked perfectly for me.
Yeah, I think they're both great. I think the war bitch stuff, I don't like that name. It's just like too eye-rolling for me.
Yeah, I couldn't get over it.
Couldn't swallow it, but I think that's fun, and I think that's a fun part of this book, and it obviously I think is going to continue in a way, you know? But Jack stuff. What's just what a twist. What a twist.
Yeah, no, I love it. And it goes back to that sort of like nature fighting back that we kind of got at the end of Crippled God with the wolves. But I think this is done in a more coherent way that I really liked with the Jack and the Teblor. Yeah. But I really loved it. And then, you know, the end with the water just bursting forth and kind of fucking everything up, like, it's unexpected but great.
Awesome, but also chilling scene.
Yes, absolutely. And it's like, again, I guess people aren't listening to this back and back. It's because we're talking about Bone Hunters and this back to back. And we mentioned in that one that, like, there's sort of in lots of books, there's like a twist at the end. And that's definitely the twist here where you're building up and there's going to be this big battle. There's going to be this big battle.
Sure.
And then all of a sudden it's just like, no, this bigger thing that you forgot about is just the thing. Like, that's what's going to happen. You can't stand against the water that's coming, which I think is great. Oh, and that reminds me, sorry, I'm kind of going all over the place at this point. First time, I think, in like a single work that Erikson does a time jump, which I thought was very interesting and a little jarring, but I think it worked.
Yeah, it struck me as fine. Which reminds me of another thing. And sorry, we're just, honestly, we only have so much time to record this episode, so I feel like both of us are just scrambling to get
machine gunning everything we can talk about.
Every opinion we could possibly fit, but not super detailed.
Yeah, exactly.
But no, I agree. I think it is a first time jump. I mean, there's a flashback to Seven Cities, but that's not like a time jump proper in Book of the Fallen. But anyway,
the only thing is like Midnight Tides. Obviously, the whole book happens before, but like nothing. Yeah, that's just like a book's taking place in a different time, not like during the actual like narrative storytelling.
So let me ask you this: am I out of my mind? Is the word "fuck" in Book of the Fallen at all?
Oh yes, I believe. Yeah.
Is it? I don't have a great memory of it, but for some reason it really stood out to me because I feel like "fuck" is in this book a ton. Like fucking die is like there's just so much fuck in this story.
Interesting. It's in the main book, right? I mean, you've read it more recently than me, so maybe not.
That's part of me think I'm like it has to be in the main book, but also it doesn't have a memory in me, or maybe it's like Steve just wanted to use it more, so it's more in this story. I don't know, but it definitely stood out to me as a new element to this story.
That does also remind me of another machine gun opinion. They do have a lot of really fun new swears, and those are fan servicey because it's like, I think they say Iskar's balls at some time.
I think it's Iskar's prick or something.
Yeah, like there's definitely some fun, and I think that's a good way to do fan service because like, of course, there'd be some new curses because there's new gods, but like it's also characters we know, and it's like, oh yeah, Whiskey Jack's penis, great.
It's pretty funny. It's pretty funny.
I like
that. I was just so happy with a lot of the background world building. I think a lot of it's really fun. It's just fun. It's just fun stuff to learn, you know. And
the Emperor is Malak Rel, right?
Yeah, yeah.
I don't think there's any reason to believe it's someone else, but who knows? I guess
for sure. And so just to kind of wrap things up here, pushing towards the end, I know it's a book and we're really trying to squeeze a lot here in a little bit of time, but yeah, maybe we'll make another podcast or Iskar Jared put some stuff out. I don't know. I hope we can talk on the Discord, but what I was going to say is to touch on a few of the themes of the book, you know? And you mentioned it before, and it's like refugees are a big part of the series, and not always a big part of the series, but in Dust of Dreams, of course, all of a sudden it's like, we're going to talk about refugees right now. Yeah. And like, I don't think people love that part of the main series generally.
People aren't a fan of the snake in Dust of Dreams?
People are not everyone's favorite part. Not everyone's favorite part. But I think it's interesting here and obviously immensely topical. I mean, to talk about every day I wake up afraid of climate change. And, you know, over the next 30 years, over 1 billion people are going to be displaced because of climate change. You know, large parts of the earth will become unlivable, uninhabitable, and unable to grow crops. You know, it is going to be a major problem, and how we deal with these refugees will be a major political issue for the rest of for the foreseeable future. You know, so for this to be tackled dead on in the book, and it starts off. I mean, it starts with that scene of Dallas and the other Templar discussing what to do and introducing the idea that this flood's coming. It was really powerful for me. And it's something I think about all the time. I mentioned I'm filled with existential dread about climate change. And I don't know. I wonder so to me, that was one of the biggest. I mean, I enjoyed other parts of the book. I have other thoughts. We're just rushing through them. I wonder what other themes you walked away thinking about, or if you were so struck by this climate refugee thing as I was. So
yeah, I think the two major thing walking away from it is the refugeeism. And I did it. Obviously, there's a very clear parallel to climate change. Very, very obviously clear.
It's almost text.
Yeah, with the huge ice melting. I mean, the only difference, obviously, is at this time it's the jagged, blah, 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 whatever, instead of gases, CO2, blah, blah. But I kept thinking about how political refugees and even like immigration, we have failed to test so horrifically. I mean, again, I'm always confined to my particular space, which is in the United States. A big thing is like immigration from the South and from Mexico and Latin America, people coming, and our country not being, for the most part, very accepting of them, despite their coming from very difficult situations, and seeking things in like very good-hearted ways. Just like, there's that whole discussion of like, well, why didn't you just come to the empire and ask for, places and for us to give you clemency? And it's like, well, we didn't think you would, and you would probably not let us. Anyway, I'm kind of rambling here, but like that's really what I thought of as like I always think about this when I'm reading Malazan. Like there are people who are reading this that are still really against, accepting Syrian refugees from the disastrous wars over there, and yet it's quite clear in this that like Erickson saying like, no, these people have nowhere to go. Like it's our duty to care for them. I think that's really, like you said, I think that's a really great theme. And then the theme that I came away also really thinking of, I mentioned right at the outset, is addiction in its many different forms, whether alcohol, drugs, hard recreational drugs, or medical drug dependency, like the opioid epidemic, all of this stuff. Not just that like we need to care for those people, but like those people themselves having the courage to try to face that in like really helpless situations. I mean, it's hard to battle your mind. Showing them as being virtuous for fighting that, I think, was such a cool storyline that is not told enough.
I really agree, and I think what's powerful about that storyline how it's defining strength as like I was listening to that conversation Iskar put up, and I forget who said it. They talked about how they defined her strength as her ability to fight against addiction, which I think is a powerful thing, and to tackle that storyline, I think is another good thing to put in this book.
And by the way, those two themes together, like, is the problem of homelessness in first world countries, right? Primarily, it's usually some form of mental illness and our inability to show compassion on refugees or people who have been put in horrible circumstances because of things outside their control.
These are questions of like victims and innocence and our ability to help them, and yeah, it's interesting stuff. We're running up against the clock here, but I will say I was mostly walked away feeling great about the book. I was mildly frustrated by some of the stuff we learn about blood oil and Tabloor society. I think, there's a lot of conversation around House of Chains and Karsa and, these rapes and what that means for him as a character, what that means for the Tabloor. And whilst this book really dives into some issues around sexual assault, including, of course, the abuse of Rant, I felt like when we learned more about the blood oil and Tabloor society, I think I walked away feeling pretty frustrated about that whole situation. And I wonder if we're going to learn more about it in other books, but I just would have had to note a feeling of frustration on my half. So, yeah. But I mostly feel pretty good about the book, and I wonder, and looking forward, if you where do you think the rest of this trilogy is going?
Ooh, that's a tough question. I mean, so the easy answer is Darujhistan, right? But I do think maybe to be a little bit more ballsy, I think this is leading up to a confrontation between Rant and Karsa. I don't know if it's going to be a physical, violent confrontation, but I think there is going to be that is going to be the personification of the dealing with the past. And I think that could go one of two ways. I think Karsa could handle that well or not well. And I think that will be sort of the crux upon which this turns. If he handles it well, it's going to be a very different series in how it ends. If he handles it poorly, I think it's going to be very interesting that I think the reader is going to be more inclined to go, even though we have this strong history with Karsa, I think the way Rant has been built up, I think we would be primed to go against Karsa, and I think that'd be a very interesting turn to actually have him turn into a villain in the end. But I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think it's going to be really interesting. I think it's going to be interesting to see how Karsa is introduced. As I said, I really think the book, it's all about examining the consequences of his actions, So I think how he is willing to take accountability or reckon with them is a crucial question in this. Here's what I will say. I hadn't even considered it. Then yesterday I heard Neil Farag offer his hot take that the series, I think Halor said as well that the series is going to go to Letharis or Seven Cities, and that we're going to go to different continents. This was their hot take, that we're going all over the place to examine different consequences of Pars's actions. I don't know.
The next one opens up in Seven Cities kind of thing?
Yeah, maybe something like that, or Letharis. I don't know. We'll see. Part of me feels like we're going to stay on Genebacchus, you know? It'll be interesting to see.
That's an interesting take. I could see Steve doing that. Steve, I haven't talked to him like you, so maybe I should still say Erickson. But I want him to keep with this focused take that he's done in this first one, which is kind of what I got from the narrative. I hope that's how it keeps going.
I agree. I really hope we follow almost directly where we started off, especially since I feel like the book leaves us in a pretty interesting place. And I think it just puts us in those characters' positions so well.
Yeah.
I kind of want to follow up on that. And if we cut away and next book starts on Seven Cities with Joe Schmo, new character, part of me would be a little disheartened.
You know? I would, yeah. I think you'd probably pull it off and it'd be like fine in the end, but I would be a little disappointed by that.
Yeah, for sure. But
listen, I will say maybe in close. Oh, go ahead.
Close away. I
was going to say in closing, I think one of the coolest things about like this whole book is like, it's the first time that I have been like, there's been, for me, I mean, this might not be true, but like it feels like a new book drop. Like everyone has their theories. Like the Malazan community has grown so much over the pandemic that like, I don't know, it feels very different and fun, like book drop. Does that make sense? Like a lot of different fandoms get excited about a new book coming out, and it never really felt like that way to Malazan until like this time we had enough like YouTube channels or Discord servers or whatever where like it felt like there was a lot of people excited about this book. And so I want to keep that momentum going and tell people, please pre-order it, buy it, because that makes a huge deal with the publisher so we can keep this kind of energy going. Because I think it's been really, really fun to, like, as you said, like go on YouTube and see what people think of The God Is Not Willing and listen to a podcast about it. You know, like I love that.
Yeah. I mean, if people buy the book, I think they're going to enjoy it. You know, I think, I think we both feel that way. I think we both enjoyed our reads of it. So, and it is funny, especially since here on 10 Very Big Books, we spend so much time rereading the Book of the Fallen. And certainly in the Malazan community, I think a lot of the conversation gets situated around first read-throughs, I feel. Mm-hmm. And, our show's situated around that, But I think it is really exciting to have the attention drawn away from that and to talk about a wholly new book. So,
100%.
So, well, listen, obviously we could have talked longer, but we just had a lot to fit in. We only had like 40 minutes, mostly because we went over long talking about Bone Hunters. We were having a great time.
Yeah.
But listen, Andy, thanks for coming on again, and thanks for making another show with me.
Yeah, absolutely. This was delightful, and keep going with the podcast.
All right. Thanks so much. And Andy Smith's on YouTube. I don't know. It's in the description. I don't know where this is going. Podcasts. All right.
Fine, whatever.
Yeah. Goodbye, everybody. See you.